All right. So fantastic. People are still coming in the room, but we will get ourselves started. So there in front of you, as you can see, are our corporate partners and our partners. As I said, they're the people who enable these webinars to take place. So again, really appreciate the support of those organisations. As per usual with the webinars, I'd like to issue our little disclaimer. I think everyone's kind of happy that I do so. For those who can see it on screen, fantastic. For those who can't, I shall read it out. The views and opinions expressed during the following webinar are those of the individual contributor and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the contributor's employer, organisation, committee, or other group or individual. Please respect all contributions, and we encourage you to join the conversation via the interactive functions available. So, welcome. And as you can see, we've got a great panelist lineup today. As I say, a few new areas covered off, which is really, really good to see. First and foremost, again, we are obviously here to discuss the impact of the coronavirus specific to our sector. And so we'll just kind of, obviously this is, far more human health pandemic than anything else. And that's the core of everyone's attentions. But we'll just view it from how it's impacting upon our industry. So we've got, starting this week, we've got an update of the CAPS data, which Kevin came on last week and showed us that information. So we'll run through that in a second. As I said, we've got the views and opinion first from small, if you like, independent body shop. Christine's own words, by the way, small and independent, but we'll use those. We've got a big insurer with their own repair operations, and we've also got a paint company. So great insight from a global perspective. And again, we're just looking at how the market is starting to re-emerge post-lockdown. What are we learning? What can we learn from other areas around the world? And really just continuing that thought stream on supply chain interaction, support responsibilities at this kind of moment in time. So I'm just going to hop across to Christine. So if I come to you first, if I may. Could you just give us a very quick insight into Christine Maskell and NCR Body Shops?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Most people know me for one reason or another. NCR Body Shops, 34 years old, 3 sites in Berkshire, Wiltshire and Hampshire. Turnover would have been 7 million this year had this not happened. And basically, I am still very much in control of the business with my co-director, Mark. I think I'm quite an optimist, and I think I'm also, the sorts of things that I've experienced over the past few weeks are going to be very, very similar to other independent body shop owners, especially where you've got the owner-driver who is still very much involved in the business. My day-to-day has changed quite slightly because I have to get up early in the morning now and come to work every day. 6-7 day weeks, certainly in the first few weeks, were quite normal. But I think it's also awakened my fighting spirit. I'm not going to go down on this just because of some pesky virus. I will fight. It is my life. I will fight for my 70 employees, and I will do whatever I can. And as a group, we've actually worked through the whole situation. We've covered all of our postcodes, plus extras for all of our work partners who have been incredibly supportive. And then we sequentially closed the smaller sites and regrouped just in Newbury, where we have the capacity to do 100 cars a week. So that's about 50% of our capacity that we could offer just on one site, and that really started to make life easier because we were able to centralise our efforts in one place to coordinate anything. I would just say that anyone who was going to pee me off were the first to be furloughed. I just didn't want to deal with anyone who wasn't going to be solid and in the same direction as me. So that's a personal thing, I suppose, and I'm sure there are many others that may have strategically realigned their businesses appropriately. But having said that, I am optimistic. We are hovering at the moment at about 40% of where we would normally be within the group. And we're waiting for the critical pivot for opening the next body shop, which will be at some point in June. We will ramp it up to up to the gunnels here in Newbury first. And this is now a multi-staffed site. We have staff from every single one of my sites, all in one place, and they're all contributing, ready for the reopening of their own sites.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Christine. Now, I will come on to David Hill of PPG. Just a very quick introduction for yourself, David, in terms of if anyone out there doesn't know you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Mark, and good afternoon, everybody. So my name is David Hill. I'm the Market Director for PPG's Refinish business in the UK and Ireland. So those who don't know PPG, we're a global paint company, Pittsburgh Plate Glass, originally from Pittsburgh, $15.2 billion US corporation with about 40,000 employees operating in pretty much every coating market and industry in the world. So I guess from a coronavirus perspective, what that's been able to give us is a bit of global perspective and foresight on, when this first happened in China. We have a manufacturing facility in Wuhan itself. We have a number of manufacturing facilities in China, so we kind of saw the start of the wave. And I think that enabled us as an organization to really move quickly on the protocols and the processes and the procedures to keep our people safe. So we were already initiating travel restrictions and updated procedures for dealing with customers, with suppliers, probably as early as mid-February, towards the end of February. So that enabled us to kind of also start to move stock around the world, because we kind of saw the way the wave might come and saw the way the Chinese were managing the situation. So our aim was to get stock in those points closest to our customers before we saw any lockdown in any of those markets as the virus spread across into Europe and into North America potentially. So I guess, that was a strength for us in terms of having a bit of early foresight and being able to start to plan some of those processes and procedures that kept our people safe. And of course, then, we saw that come across into Italy. So, our second manufacturing plant in Europe is in Milan. Our first is in Stowmarket in the UK. So we already, saw some impacts in Milan early doors, and that had a big impact on us in terms of supply chain and the market. So we saw pretty much the same effect on the Italian market as we saw, 3 weeks later in the UK market. So, claims volumes and repair volumes really down in the low, 10, 15, 20% figures at its worst. And that's, the good news is that's starting to recover in that sort of 2 or 3 week curve ahead of the UK. That's starting to improve again. So, from a UK perspective, the impact on us, manufacturing site, which we had to stop production for 3 weeks, primarily to protect the people and make sure that the processes were put in place that we needed to. Secondary, because the demand wasn't there. We've all seen what happened to the demand in the market. We in the UK in Refinish have our own distribution network. Similar story, we had to figure out how to meet the demands of those customers that stayed open in a way that we could keep our teams safe. So we had to reduce to collection only through some of our distribution depots and make sure that we put the right protocols in place. Actually, I think everyone would agree it's amazing how quickly we were able, and everyone in the industry was able to move to remote working where possible. Certainly from the administrative functions, the way the IT teams skilled us all up and enabled us to be able to use remote technology, I think was a real kind of success of this pandemic. So, from our perspective, I guess in a way, great to have that foresight. And we're, from a Refinish standpoint in the UK, we're seeing exactly the same trend as you guys are reporting when you look at that CAPS data and any of the other data in the market. At its worst, it was down at, below 20%. That stabilization around sort of 30 to 40% at the moment feels about right. Interestingly, we do operate in 3 different segments. So we have classic collision body shops, we have commercial transport business in the UK, and we have light industrial coatings. And interestingly, commercial transport was less affected by the crisis than pure collision body shops. So we still significantly affected, but definitely less so. And equally less so was light industrial. So we've had to be able to kind of maintain operations depending on the customer segment, but obviously make sure we can do so in a safe way. But we are seeing those green shoots across Europe. There are some markets like Germany which are just kind of anomalies. We don't know why they seem to get away with it so lightly. The business we saw, whereas you might have seen an 80% reduction in the UK market, you only saw a 20% reduction in the German market for collision repair, which was remarkable, really. And we're not quite sure still how they did it. So I guess we can learn something from that as that starts to become clear.
We will come back to that very shortly, David. But thank you for the introduction. And I should have obviously mentioned in the first place is this big telephone here that it shall remain faceless is in fact David Mills of Direct Line Group. So David, can you just give everyone a little introduction to yourself and kind of the journey you've been on then recently?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. So good afternoon, everybody. So obviously Direct Line, we're one of the largest private motor insurers in the UK. So we've got Direct Line, Churchill, Privilege, NIG amongst our brands. Clearly, we're used to dealing with the odd sort of weather event and surge events, as we call them, but nothing quite on the scale of what we're all living through at the moment. So I guess, when this all sort of landed, it was quite an issue for us with having 10,000 staff all in offices, some of which were based in South Africa. We've got some based in India, which all seem to get locked down simultaneously. So our first priority is for our people. So getting all of those people, or as many as we could, back at home working, getting them online, getting them the access they needed to be able to carry out their day job, so to speak, as effectively as we could was our priority. And I must say we've managed to get, I think the last I heard was 98% of our people now are actually working at home. So a fantastic achievement in a relatively short period of time as well. So we managed to achieve that within probably 3 weeks of lockdown. So that was quite fortunate. The area I look after, the external networks and our engineering services, we were sort of quite used to being field-based and working at home. So it was sort of not really that different for our teams. But obviously we at Direct Line operate a mixed economy model. So, we've got 1,400 staff in our own repair centres who we needed to make sure we were protecting as well. And obviously they can't repair cars whilst at home. So that gave us some of the challenge that some of you guys will all be facing on a day-to-day basis. So we've seen it from both sides in effect. I think similar to what everybody's saying, really, getting that claims volume through at roughly 20% of what it normally is has been a bit of a lifesaver for us, to be fair, whilst I realise that throws challenges out in the repair sector. But certainly for us, it's enabled us to get that working from home ethos embedded, get the technology working and enable us to then sort of progress to where we are today. As David sort of touched on, we are seeing a slight ramp up in volume, but I must say it's only slight. I thought it would have been a bigger spike than what it has been, if I'm honest. But we're still at around 75% of normal volume, so still very, very low at the moment. We see some key challenges coming. So I think, as lockdown becomes released, as people are allowed to go out on the roads and sort of go and, within restriction, go and drive out on the roads to go and exercise or see one family member or whatever that may be, we see that road usage going up, which can only mean more claims. I think in our auto services sites, that gives us a challenge because we've been operating a sort of 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off rota with only 50% of those teams in at any one time. And I guess you guys must face some of the same challenge around when do you start to bring those people back and when is there enough volume to keep them all occupied is going to be the key. But I guess we'll touch on some of that later on in this session. So very challenging times, but I think as always, as we British are, we're very resilient and we're very agile and we always seem to find a way around things. And we're seeing very much that Dunkirk spirit and people working together and sort of coming across problems and fixing them very quickly. So as always, with these challenges, there's always a sort of bright side. I'm similar to Christine. I'm a glass half full person and I think we'll come out of this in a better place than we went in, if I'm honest.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dave. Now, just wanted to come on to the CAPS insights for this week. So each week they are updating the sector in terms of those claims. And again, just to clarify, unique claims, claim that is initiated and seen for the first time. Supply chain transmissions are the unique claims plus any additional transmission on the same claim. So notification to parts vendors or mobility. And we can see here, so again, just the kind of trend analysis, a little 1% drop off from the previous week. So this is weekend in the 15th, so last Friday, 1% back off from the previous week. Supply chain transmissions down 3%. Kind of the suggested reasoning was that there was a ramp up because businesses were starting to sort of plan their return, therefore people booking in work. And as kind of people started to come out, considering the furlough process, etc. Difference between the charts could be a result of the claims being accepted but not as yet estimated or started. Therefore, the parts not ordered or mobility being hired. Severity and kind of details of the incidents themselves not known, obviously, because it's the CAP system. No insight into that, but that's where it is. Again, no real trend. Again, 17th of April was kind of the lowest point that we reached, and since then, subsequent weeks, we seem to be climbing out, obviously with a little bit of a falter last week, but it will be interesting to see where that heads in the coming weeks. And we should, as of next week, have some more information, heat maps in terms of where those incidents are actually occurring. So keep our eyes peeled on that one. But Christine, I'll come on to you. You've already given us a great insight into the business, the operations, as it were. As you kind of re-emerge, and you've already touched upon it, but where are you kind of really focusing your attentions right now? What are you looking for? What are those indicators that says, right, I now need to put in the next sort of building block in place?
It's all volume driven. I think we've been a volume business, as most body shops are, and without that volume, for some people it can be quite catastrophic. I have to say, without the government furlough, I think it would have been an even bigger disaster for the whole nation, not just body shops. And I have to take my hat off to old Rishi. I think he's done a fairly good job at making sure that we can support as many employees as possible. From our point of view, we can carry out 50% of our turnover just in Newbury. So when we reach that point, we are looking then to reopen another site, and we will trickle the work in there. We're already doing the preparation here in Newbury. We currently have a VDA from every site working here in one place so that they can start to prepare their own work for their own sites. We can open an operation within 3 days. So I'm quite confident that we will get to that point. However, if I was having this conversation 2 weeks ago, I would say that Body Shop number 2 would reopen the first week of June. I honestly believe with the extension of furlough and all of the muddle around schools reopening, and when they do reopen, on what level, what are they going to be able to offer the parents? I think that's going to be at a later stage in June, with possibly the final Body Shop reopening in July. While I think the furlough's been great, I think for it to be at the 80% level for as long as it is not going to encourage a lot of people to go back to work, particularly if their gross salary is below the £2,500 a month. I think a lot of, which is probably 28, 30 grand, a lot of people might be encouraged, especially through the summer where the weather's been so nice, to perhaps stay at home. Just a thought.
Okay.
But it's going to be driven by volume, most definitely.
Okay, fantastic. David Mills, I'll jump across to you there in terms of, obviously, you've given us an insight into Direct Line, and you started talking about your own shops there and the number of people, etc., involved. How are things looking in terms of your own operations, 21 sites that you now operate? How is that beginning to look? And, how do you then start to disperse, if you like, as those volumes increase, the work that you kind of, the claims that you start to see?
Yeah, I mean, clearly we, as I sort of touched on earlier, we have got that mixed economy model, which we sort of geographically split. So that the order services sites have got their geographical areas that they cover, same as the Tier A sites have got geographical areas they cover. So it's not around the volume and priority of where we actually send it. It's a question of when a claim falls in that geographical area, it gets apportioned to that particular owner of that postcode area. So our auto services sites have been sort of, as I touched on, they're at 50% at the moment. We've been prioritising non-drivers and key workers. So we've got a bit of I wouldn't say a backlog, although it's a bit of a virtual car park of vehicles that we've been sort of holding back on. So we need to sort of get tackling that, and which we've started this week. So we've now started bringing in those drivable and non-frontline workers. So we see that volume over time picking up. So I think that gives us the challenge of how we bring those teams back in, certainly in the repair centres, because that social distancing is going to be the challenge for the industry as a whole, isn't it? And whether that means we'll need to change our hours of working, change our shift patterns, inevitably I think it will. And we're trialling some of that as we speak. Certainly in the repair centres, in the other areas, we sort of want to try and keep people at home for as long as we possibly can. Because again, we want to sort of make sure as we bring people back into the offices that we can protect them and look after their welfare by that social distancing, to enable those guys to operate as normal. And I see that being the key challenge for us, in terms of how we do that around the volume that's been made available. So I think, as Christine touched on, it's all around that tipping point of when you go from 50%, 60% of your staff in the business around that volume that's available, because you need to be able to keep them busy at the same time. I think Christine touches on an interesting factor of the fact that, I mean, we haven't got anybody on furlough, so none of our staff are actually furloughed. They're being paid anyway. So furlough doesn't really impact our people. They'll be brought back as and when the business needs.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. David, PPG, now I'll come to you and we'll kind of, I suppose, broaden out the conversation in terms of, and you've already referenced some sort of global insights that you've had in terms of how those others markets are starting to re-emerge. Where do you kind of, do you think we'll follow a same pattern as, Chinese volumes have increased, or, Italy or Spain? Do you see us going in that same direction?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult comparison. I mean, as we see every day on the news, the comparison country by country is not necessarily that easy to make. If you look globally, so across all the businesses that we operate, we're estimating a volume reduction of between 30 and 35% for the second quarter of this year across all of our business globally. So that's a significant impact. We've seen that China's recovered. So if you look at production output in our facilities in China, back up to 90% of where they were. We've now got 135 manufacturing plants globally open and operating at around about an average capacity of about 65%. So we can see, definitely the positive trend is spreading. I would say, if you look at the markets, Italy is probably the one that we look like we're tracking more closely to. If you look at the infection rates and certainly the death rate as well, sadly, that's the one that we're closest to, albeit we are slightly higher than that. And so if I was to pick a market where we could use to kind of view the recovery, it would be Italy. I think China's a difficult one to draw comparisons to, just because of the culture there and the way that the business is done. So from a European perspective, I would say probably Italy. I think, from our perspective, excuse me, if you think about some of the things Christine and Dave were talking about with volumes returning, we're trying to get that balance of how do we support the volume that's returning as it's returning, but equally, how do we make sure we bring people in to support proactively our customers to drive efficiency in the process where we can support that. So we've got a bit of a balance of support demand, but actually what can we do proactively to make sure that you guys don't go back to doing what you used to do? And that we can improve that. And that for me is a key message across our entire business is let's not go back to doing it the way we used to do it, because there's inefficiency that we've all known about for many years. This is the prime opportunity for us as an organisation to act upon that and to support our customers do something about that, really. So that furlough discussion for us is a challenging one, because if you just link it directly to volume, it will take us a lot longer than if we start to think proactively about how can we support our customers. So we're taking that view of, let's try and bring our teams back in to really get a view of our customers about what the impacts are on you, what are the key blockers in your facilities that we can help with when times are a bit quieter, and then we can make sure that we embed that best practice as you move forwards.
And is this all kind of work in progress at the moment for yourself, David? Is it kind of the blank piece of paper approach where you start to complete?
No, the funny thing is we've had a lot of these things available for quite a while, but sometimes you need a catalyst, right, to get people to adopt them. So things like automated ordering and remote capability of contactless interaction with paint orders is something that exists, in our systems, and we haven't really managed to get the kind of momentum that we needed to. Moonwalk, as many of you will know, we launched the new automated mixing system, Moonwalk, the back end of last year. That for us, when you look at what we need to do from a social distancing and a hygiene perspective, gives us a great opportunity to enable customers to reduce social contact, specifically in paint mixing rooms and in and around that process. Single person, de-skilled mixing ability with that. And also looking at remote training. So how do we, rather than just having people sit on a webinar for 3-4 hours and fall asleep, how do we make that truly interactive?
We lost him.
Can we make that less people, more interactive in terms of the process, and make it really engaging for our customers? So I would say things that we were already working on, but equally, that this has given us the chance to really accelerate some of those initiatives as well.
Okay. Fabulous, thank you. Right, and Christine, I'll come to you, because we kind of had a little conversation off air that in terms of, again, you're looking at things differently. We've often referred to this, whole pandemic as an accelerator in terms of, we all had a timeline and when we possibly could adopt technology or do things differently. But this is, the here and now, and it's having a big impact, certainly on the thought processes.
It is. One of the big benefits I feel is we'd already started to use ARC360 to get our clients to send in images, largely driven by reducing key to keys. So we needed the pictures first. The beauty of ARC360 is it does drop the images from the client straight into the ARC360 shell. So there's a lot of double keying that's not required. That has now become 100% the way we do things. And the discussions where, the little old lady, etc., we haven't had any of those problems, probably because they're shielding, to be fair. But, everyone has embraced this technology and they understand it. They really get it. I think in terms of the sanitisation of the vehicles and everything, we adopted it very, very early. I had a bit of a heads up. My daughter was working in Milan when it all kicked off, and my son-in-law in Singapore. So I had a bit of a backup, or, a bit of a heads up on getting all the sanitisers and getting everything in February. We bought all of ours. But I think, yes, it's making things more efficient. We want to get rid of paper anyway, so we're finally getting rid of job packs. We're using everything electronically now, and it's been very, very successful, and people get it at last. They can't just go back into their shell and think, I used to do it this way. They really do get that drivers don't have a piece of paper any longer. The information is on their iPad, and that's all there is to it. So that's been very, very good. In terms of other technology, I think we were very lucky. We already had leased lines. We already had very, very good internet for what we were doing. Thank goodness, because we've all had to work from home a little bit more often. And that's been very successful, but nothing to the extent that you're suggesting, Dave, at Direct Line, 98% at home. I mean, that just has not happened at all. As you say, we need to physically be here to fix the cars. I think the main thing for me is the cost that this is adding. For example, the ARC360 costing model is showing at the moment that in April, each ARC360 cost us £41. That's a lot of money just to produce an estimate, make sure you get paid by Alder invoice, and of course using Alder target, which has been necessary. So I think the cost base for what we're doing now needs to be looked at completely by our work partners. The model we had before was always based on this is how we've always done it, this is how we've done it for the last 30 years, and volume. The volume drives it. When that volume comes out of the equation, it's completely different factors that need to be looked at. We weren't able to have help either because our businesses were too big. So we weren't able to get the grants that many of the smaller businesses were, which is another reason why the option of closing the doors wasn't an option. We weren't able to get the 25 grand, apart from one case. The 25 grand would have been lovely if you're in a situation where that pays most of your rent for 4 months. Brilliant. But we weren't in that situation, which is why we decided to trade through.
Okay, fabulous. And Dave Mills, I'll come to you. You already mentioned it yourself in terms of how you're, looking at doing things differently, whether that be within the actual repair centres themselves or as the insurer. And the comments come through. Is working from home permanently something that you're now looking at in terms of an organisation?
Yeah. So absolutely, for some populations. It might be the right thing for us to do, and in that case, we'll look to facilitate that. But I think we've got to bear in mind that, especially this week, amongst all, Mental Awareness Week, some people go to work, they live on their own, they go for that interaction with others. So we need to be able to sort of facilitate what those guys are requiring from their employer. So I think we want to sort of be able to offer options to our people while still enabling them to be socially distanced and protecting them. So I think without a doubt, we're certainly looking at it differently. We'd announced some site closures literally just before this pandemic. And I think, in terms of that, it's sort of speeded up some of our thinking around some of the technology that we're sort of employing to enable us to do this, and the fact that it's actually working a lot better than we could ever have envisaged. I think the challenge for us is, I mentioned it, we're at 25% of our claims volume. What happens when we're at 100% of our claims volume, and will it still work as well? I don't know. That's the bit. It's untested technology is what I'm trying to say. But so far, so good. And absolutely, we'd be looking to make this permanent for those people who it's right for. And actually, we can ensure that they're productive whilst at home.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, people is a key part of this equation. People's attitudes, people's perceptions, fear factors, all of these things come into play as we start to re-emerge. We've seen documents, guidance issued by government in terms of returning to work, etc. David Heel, come to you, PPG. Again, is that something that PPG globally has kind of taken an approach on? Has it been, country by country that you've kind of, worked on your own ways of instating kind of this, this kind of process?
Yeah, I mean, there are certain elements that are global in terms of the safety protocols and social distancing, and we've got a lot of crisis management plans that have been globally put together across all of our businesses. And I would equally like to say that we've got a lot of information there in terms of what those plans and those processes look like. So if we can be of help to anyone, or anyone wants to use some of those things as a template, more than happy to share some of that stuff. When it comes back to specifically related to furlough and returning to work, legislation differs across all the different markets, so it tends to be very specific. But actually, the initiatives that we're working on when we bring people back to work, how do we keep meeting our customers' needs without physically seeing them so often? How do we reduce the contact that we currently have with them and make sure that we can still meet the needs of those customers? But equally, from a people perspective, how do we re-engage those people that are coming back to work? I think I saw a comment from Chris on the chat about people that are working from home on 80% or even 100% of their money and not currently working. Trying to get them back into work and get them working efficiently, effectively in an engaged manner is really tough, right? So one of the things we're working on is how do we how do we have a plan that brings them back into the business, almost a reintegration plan, because it's going to be a bit of a shock when you've sat at home for 2-3 months to come back to work and have to put all hands to the pump and get on with it. It's going to be challenging. So some of those things around how we re-engage and reintegrate our people is something that we're working on specifically across the different countries as well.
Okay, brilliant. Christine, coming to you again. Obviously the human side of all of this, and we've talked about kind of the pressures on repairers, cash flow being, obviously critical at this moment in time. We've also talked about kind of milestones. It's not necessarily the here and now, but it might be 3 months down the line where things really start to pinch. What are your kind of key areas of focus, if you like? What are you laser focused on right now within your own operation?
The main thing is good credit control, and we've been able to have some very good conversations with our work partners, trying to get to grips with old debt. And it's many and various reasons why old debt occurs. It could be the VDA's forgotten to put the inherited charges on. It could be that my accounts team didn't push the pay me now button, as it were. There are many reasons. So I think cash flow and making sure that you get rid of your aged debt is one of the things that we've been focusing on now. The speed of actually doing your invoicing and the speed of payment are going to be very, very important. As a business, we're fairly cash rich, so I don't feel that we've had such a problem as maybe some people will. But if we do get a pinch, it'll be when we ramp everything up and we've got all 3 sites open, and then those big bills plus the VAT that we're deferring become payable. So I think for all of us, it'll be more August, September when we really start to see the pinches. Especially as the people who have been furloughed, if we start to bring them back, we would have to start to pay towards their salaries. So I think if you've fared well to now, start to brace yourself for the autumn, because I think that's probably the pinch point, certainly for us. One of my challenges or concerns is with staff that have been off maybe since March. I think there's going to be a number that will have anxiety, and they will feel just very anxious about doing anything, however safe your workplace is. I think that's going to be an issue. I think another issue is going to be perhaps they don't want to work anymore. If they've got to their late 50s or whatever and their hubby doesn't work anymore or whatever, maybe they just won't want to work anymore. So I do think that the face of our work teams will change between now and the end of the year, for many, many reasons. And I think that's kind of what I'm bracing myself for, seeing how we can adapt to these issues if we can adapt. Because ultimately, if you're a panel beater, you're going to have to get yourself back into that workshop, and you're going to have to do all of the social distancing things that you can possibly do. And if you can't, you are going to have to put a fresh mask on. You are going to have to put fresh gloves on along with your co-worker to fit that bonnet or whatever you've got to do in closer contact. So I think they're the main things. I also think I'm going to be quite pivotal with talking to people like Dave, who is one of my work partners, about, where is this model going to now? Because it's fantastic with volume, but maybe not if we haven't. The cost of the jobs the cost base has definitely gone out the window. Regardless of what you think, a box of gloves has gone up, by 30%. It's triple what it was just for a box of gloves. And yes, we are using 3 times as many as we used to. So, these things are definitely real. They're definitely now. And I think we are going to hit a recession. I've already lived through 2 recessions in my business life, and I think we're about as lean as we can get, to be honest. I really don't believe there is anything else that we can take out of our business model. With the recession, you're going to get people who can't afford to pay their excesses. We're going to get more cars driving around with minor damage. And in fact, that's what's happened during the lockdown period. We have had a lot of heavy work because the people who have just got a scuff on the bumper, they're just carrying on with it. The people that we've been having to take in are more and more immobiles, because I think already people are thinking about hankering down and saying, well, what can we save on?
Yeah. Okay, fantastic. David Mills, I'll come across to you in terms of some of the sort of comments Christine's obviously said there in terms of work partnerships, relationships going forward. You obviously manage your own sites as well, so you'll kind of experience this in the same challenges, if you like, as any independent would. Cost base is rising. Is it, where are we heading, if you like, I suppose?
Yeah, I guess it's all around that supply and demand, isn't it, out in the market there, where, as Christine says, we're seeing that PPE is obviously going up, and I guess that demand is quite high at this moment in time, and probably will remain so until we get some form of a vaccine, So obviously the cost of repairs is going to inflate, and we need to keep that well at the forefront of our minds, because I think keeping a sustainable model is what we're about. We see it as an absolute partnership, and payments being sort of one area where we need to make sure that the cash flows where it needs to be. So paying the invoices quicker, making sure that we can keep them afloat from that perspective. That's something an insurance company should be very good at. All insurance companies have got cash, so we should use that to enable the payments to be swifter, and we're doing an awful lot. We're always sort of at the forefront of our mind anyway, but more so at these times. But we should also consider our customers as well, who also have been on furlough, some of them are losing their jobs, and we shouldn't let those excesses prohibit them from being able to make a claim. So we've got initiatives and sort of projects underway to actually help those sort of customers who are suffering that financial hardship. So we've got things to help them so they can actually make those claims, which sounds a bit perverse for an insurance company, but we do want to encourage those customers to get their car fixed and get them back to where they were pre-accident. So there's things that we can do to try and help that. But I think from a supplier perspective, I think, as Christine says, we've got to consider all of this when we're sort of agreeing our commercial terms to make sure it's going to be sustainable going forward. Because I think some of the sort of controls and equipment that we're going to have to utilise is going to be more costly, I would suspect. So that margin is going to be challenged, isn't it, in terms of the profit that can make. So yeah, absolutely at the forefront of our mind, and all of the things that Christine mentions is something that's on our radar and will remain so.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you, Dave. And David Hill, I'll come back to you. So we are, again, you've mentioned it yourself, and I know you've surveyed lots of your partners that you work with and things. I mean, do you see relationships, evolving from this in a real positive way? Do you think we'll kind of see, I don't know, the provision of service be far more bespoke rather than kind of, carpet across, repairers? How will that work, or how is that kind of looking from PPG and obviously Brown Brothers' perspective?
Yeah. I mean, I think that remote connectivity is crucial. I mean, digitalization is happening all around us. It's something that the industry is obviously continually evolving around. But I would say maybe the pace of that evolution has not been that quick. For me, that's something that's increasing, certainly on our radar, in terms of how do we keep in connection with those customers. And it's strange, isn't it? Because the refinish and the body shop industry in the UK is a people business. It's a relationship business, isn't it? And we're going to be forced to make those relationships more remote than we were before. But I've noticed throughout this crisis that the engagement I've got, certainly with the business and with my team directly, is we're probably closer now than we ever have been. We talk more regularly on video calls than we ever have. We might probably know more about each other than we ever have, because you in the background of your video, the kids are running around and everyone gets a little bit of an insight about the wider picture of you. So for us, the question is, how can we embrace that when we get our sales teams to return to work? If our sales teams are coming in, customers aren't going to want to see them on their sites in the short term. We've got other things to worry about as well as social distancing. So how do we make that interaction remote and actually make sure that you're right to a degree, we can bespoke our interaction with each customer to give you guys what you need? How do we find a way of supporting that? as I said, there's already a number of things there that exist. It's just a question of getting on to how do we implement them. But the other thing is, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to listen to what our customers need specifically and make sure we can deliver that in a safe manner, in the new normal. And I'll give a good example. So, distributors will know well the practice of stock controls and how do we interact with our customers and the regularity we're on the sites. That process doesn't need to be done physically. That process can be done remotely, and we have the capability to be able to do that. And they're just some of the things, because it takes time out of the day of the site, it takes time out of the day of the supplier. They're the sorts of things that we believe currently are probably an area of improvement that we can drive with digitalisation and improvement of our remote connectivity.
Great stuff. Christine, coming to you. How critical is time right now? Now, everything that's obviously happened, it's almost been part of the industry. It's ingrained in the industry. I think this whole situation has kind of just highlighted an awful lot of things that are inefficient, frictional about the industry, perhaps. But how crucial is the time element now that we've almost kind of had a bit of a rude awakening in the sense that do we need mass change or a shift from what we currently know?
I think we should be using this time between now and September to really engage. I know you've got the Cobra idea, which I think is brilliant. Engage with all sectors to say, right, what are we going to do? Because we need to come back stronger in September onwards. I say September because I'm being realistic about when schools are going to have to go back to work. They're going to have to sort themselves out with more classrooms, more terrapins, more teachers, whatever it is. They're going to have to do it by then. And I think if we can use this time constructively over the next quarter, we're going to have to, because I really do believe that when the furlough finishes, there are going to be mass redundancies for not just our sector, but across all sectors. And at that point, if we haven't sort of battened down the hatches for what we're doing, we will have major problems. So I honestly believe that a lot of decisions should start to be happening within the next 3 months. The extra help and the support that we've been getting, for example, COVID cleans for vehicles, which can be up to 4 times the courtesy car you give to the client, their car, and vice versa. Why can we just say, well, it's only till the end of May? We're going to have to keep doing this going forward. It is now how we have to do things. But equally, that's a cost that needs to be passed on. We can't keep doing things in a fixed cost model. We have to actually look at more of a cost plus model, I believe, which is traditional sales and marketing. And certainly, Dave, that's how you would do things at PPG. A cost plus model has always been how traditional sales and marketing works. And I think we do need to start looking a little bit more towards that with our insurer and work partners. So time, the next 3 months are critical. If we can get through the next 3 months, I think we'll be in a strong position by the autumn. I've lost you, Mark.
Sorry, I lost everyone for a moment there. Sorry, apologies. I am still here. David Mills, I'll come across to you. Typically large insurers can take some time to move, but again, how time critical are we? And that comes from, I suppose, both perspectives in terms of, volumes and what makes an insurer tick, and also, feeding, if you like, your repair centres and the network.
Yeah, absolutely. Time's critical. I think we've seen this. We've been a lot more agile than what we would normally have done. We've got over 8,000 people working from home in a very short period of time. So we've needed to be sort of a bit less risk averse and actually take a leap of faith and use that technology. I think we need to sort of continue on that sort of pace of change, because I think for an industry, we're going to, as we've been talking, we're all going to have to do something different than what we did pre-COVID. whether that be decontaminating cars, whether that be taking orders, whether that be producing estimates remotely via image technology, whatever that may be. We're going to all probably be doing something different than we were before we went into this. So I think it's how we adapt to that and how quick we can do it. So I think September, I can't see when it's going to be. I'd like to say before September, but I'm sort of with Christine, but I think it might go on a little bit longer, if I'm honest. I think that confidence is going to take an awful lot of sort of growing now in the public sector and in our own environment. So I think until there's some form of a vaccine to give us confidence that we can actually go on as business as usual, I think we're going to have to adapt to the situation, which means trying out new things, trying new methods and doing things differently than we did. And I think the quicker we can test some of that, with the volumes being lower, is what we keep saying in our world, is with volume being so low, if we break it, the cost of breaking it is not going to be so great as if you're dealing with 300,000 claims per year. So let's do it on 20% of that rather than on the whole 100. So there's a lot of sort of initiatives and things we're trialing, and hopefully we can make ourselves more efficient, but more importantly, pass some of that on to our suppliers and body shops to enable them to sort of benefit from some of our learnings and some of that technology that we're adapting. Christine touched on using technology to sort of avoid rekeying, so that's something we're very keen on, to try and take some of that out. A lot of that's done at that FNOL claim reporting stage, so how can we sort of use that and pass some of that on to our suppliers? So that's just one example where we think we can take some of that keying out of the equation for the repairer, and obviously that's some of that administrative burden and cost that is borne at that end. So I think it's quite exciting in terms of what we can do, because I think what I've seen is that people are definitely working better together. I think the suppliers and the insurers are certainly a lot closer than they were when we went into this, but there's still a lot more we can do and a lot more we can learn from each other. So I think whilst I can't say a September or a November, I would say that try as much as we can while we've got the luxury of the lapse in volume, because it won't last forever.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Dave. Great insight. Just very, very quickly, I'm very conscious of time. We'll come around to each of you in turn, but priority kind of business focus just over the next 7 days. David, for you first at PPG. David's frozen. Christine, I'll come to you.
I'm still very active in financial control of the business. So I have applied for my furlough payments today, and I will be carrying out payroll next week. And with that, I'm also going to be conducting back to work half days so that staff can actually come in. They're not actually working, but it's more of a back into the workplace. This is how we do things post-COVID. This is our risk assessment. This is how you need to behave. These are your colleagues. So I'm going to be introducing that in the next 7 days, just to re-engage my staff. Fabulous.
Thank you very much. And Dave Mills, next kind of 7 days for yourself at Direct Line Group?
Yeah, so obviously taking care of our people and making sure that they're all sort of kept engaged and communicated to, so that's something we're very keen on. Same for our customers, making sure that we're sort of given priority to those frontline workers and making sure that we're sort of processing them in a speedily way. And I guess because now we're starting to repair those drivable and non-key workers in our auto services sites, making sure that we get our people back on board, getting them efficient, getting them repairing those cars and clearing that virtual car park to get ready for when that volume does start to creep back up.
Brilliant. And you know, you've kind of alluded to it yourself, but open to conversation from from anyone who might reach out and say, hey Dave, I've got something new or something that we can possibly, try differently?
Absolutely. And anything that's going to make either ourselves or our suppliers more efficient, we're absolutely open to have a look and test.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Well, I think we've lost David from PPG. He seems a bit frozen, so we'll leave him there. Oh, he's come back somewhere. Another fascinating insight. Thank you very much indeed. I think we've kind of skimmed through most of the questions or touched upon them. There was some mentions of excess payments, Dave, in there from an insurer perspective. Can insurers take payment of excess at FNOL? That might be one for today or another one to address a bit later on.
I can answer that. So,
yeah.
To see your question, it can be done. So we are doing that with some of our customers. And as I mentioned and touched on, we're also looking to help fund some of that excess for some of our financial hardship customers who are suffering that financial hardship, who's probably been made redundant through this process, something of that nature. We've got things in play to help fund that with them and sort of give them a bit of freedom to be able to afford to proceed with that claim.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. So thank you to everybody for joining us. We really appreciate the input. Christine, Dave Mills and David PPG. He's disappeared somewhere, but thank you very much for the input. Again, another great job, really good insight. Thank you to everyone for joining us. As always, we go again next Wednesday where we'll touch upon some obviously different angles, and we'll also kind of expand upon that notification claims data that we're seeing, because we're looking at perhaps mapping it regionally now. So another good insight we hope to come there. So thank you very much for your time today, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the sunshine and have a good week, and we'll catch up with you all soon. Thank you very much.